All right, welcome everyone to Let's Face Off. It is Brad here, and I'm with Jim and Calder. Say hello, guys.
Hi,
Hi
guys.
guys.
And actually, today we have the privilege of being joined by an individual whose voice I'm sure most of you will recognize. He is the TV play-by-play announcer for the Seattle Kraken as they embark on their inaugural season, Mr. John Forslund.
Hi,
Thank you for joining
guys.
us.
How you
It's
doing?
my pleasure. How are you?
We're doing good.
We're doing well.
Good.
Again, I am so thankful that you're able to join us. It is a privilege to speak with you tonight. Before we get started, though, I do have to ask one question. Was the puck kicked in Vegas?
100%.
We all thought we were watching FIFA World Cup.
Right.
I find the logic of Dave Jackson, the official that's been commandeered by ESPN to interpret the rules. He said something about the puck. You can't kick it in on the outside of your skate. I don't know. Biomechanically, you can kick on the outside of your foot. I know that. So to me, it was kicked in without question. And I'm pretty objective.
I think a lot of us think it was kicked in. Anyone who's played soccer, that's almost the exact motion you do when you kick it.
Correct. And there was flexion. You know, the distinct kicking motion that's in the rule book. To me, it's a knee flexion, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. A kick is a kick. That puck was kicked in.
You should, everyone, you hear that? John says it was kicked. I think we should appeal the league, and we would probably send us to overtime. We want that 1 point, at least 1 point.
That won't get you too far.
Won't get us anywhere.
Oh.
So again, thank you for joining us. Our previous guest, we've kind of started with the same question, and we wanted to kind of relay that directly to you, and that would be, what got you into hockey? Like, what brought you to the game?
I think there's two things that brought me to the game. Number one was the Boston Bruins success in the late 60s, early 70s. Okay. So in 1970, when they won the Stanley Cup and Bobby Orr scored that iconic goal where he scores the goal, he gets tripped and he flies through the air, and the Bruins win in overtime and they defeat the St. Louis Blues. That's the first recollection I have of watching hockey on television. And it was the cadence call of Dan Kelly on CBS that kind of got me hooked into a hobby, which I then started from that point throughout my formative years of calling games off the television, being infatuated by broadcasting. So that's how I got into the idea that I might want to be a play-by-play guy in this sport. But the second thing is, my dad and I had an unbelievable connection of going to hockey games. I was a baseball player, and the only regret I have maybe in my life, I'm pretty lucky, is the fact that I never really got to play competitive hockey at a high level because I got to it too late in my life. And I was already too egotistical that I didn't want to go through a period of time where I was 12 and 6-year-olds were better than I was. And I think if I put my mind to it, I might have been a better hockey player, but it was going to games with my father, watching games with my father, all the way up until he passed away when I started my career in the minor leagues. That was our thing. So to me, it was a parental bond and some kind of a dream that I had, some kind of hold on me that the game had. And then my mom was very responsible in terms of me learning about the game because I didn't like to read. And she said, you got to read more. And I said, I hate these books. And she said, well, read something you like. So then I immersed myself in hockey. It's funny because I love baseball, right? But it was more about playing baseball. And hockey was more of an infatuation and hobby. So I went to libraries and I read everything I could about the history of hockey, and I immersed myself in it. And I had pretty good recall, so I remembered most of it. So I guess it was useful.
I grew up playing baseball too. In Arizona, the hockey was nothing at the time when I was growing up. Now
I'm sure
it's becoming a hotbed. So hopefully Austin Matthews goes back there, but we won't mention that anyway. Just kind of a slight follow-up on you watching the game or even broadcasting the game, is there a specific game that you remember, like the most memorable game that you've been a part of, whether that was watching with your father or broadcasting?
Well, there's so many games as a fan, the trials and tribulations of my team, which were the Boston Bruins throughout the 70s. They always were beaten by the Montreal Canadiens, could never beat them. Close, but never good enough to beat them. But, now that I've done this professionally for almost 40 years, I don't know. There's so many different games that bleed together, and people will say, well, you're playing to the audience now, John. But I'm about to, because the first win in Kraken history is one of the highlights of my career. And I've called some great games nationally, regionally, Stanley Cup game, Stanley Cup final, All-Star game, outdoor game, 100th anniversary game for NBC. David Ayers, the emergency goaltender. That was an unbelievable story. But because of what I've been through personally the last couple of years of my career, that first win for the Kraken, that broadcast, is one of the highlights of my career.
That was kind of going to be my follow-up, is has it changed throughout the years? And clearly it has, because it just changed a week and a half ago. So
Correct.
And definitely a deserving win by them. I was watching that game, and it was a fun one to watch. And I'm not a Kraken fan, but in our hearts, I think we're all fans of any time a new franchise comes into the league, minus Vegas.
I got you.
The shirt says most of what needs to be said.
Oh, well, I love that place.
Yeah.
And I have done a lot of playoff games with the Sharks over the years. And I love that place. And I saw the Rolling Stones there way back when. Yeah.
Very nice.
In the Shark Tank. Yeah.
So the last two seasons have obviously been impacted by something much larger than hockey, the pandemic. With all the COVID restrictions that have been implemented, how has that affected you, and how does it change the way you do your role?
Well, it's interesting. That's a great question, because it's changed everything, really. The last couple of years, all of our access has been taken away. You can take these Zoom calls with coaches and players and put them right where the sun doesn't shine. It's brutal. So losing that contact makes it difficult, but it makes you be better as a broadcaster, if you can understand what I'm saying. So last season, I worked independently with NBC. About half the games were done in studio. The other half were on site with no fans, some fans. And then by the time we got to the playoffs, in many venues, we had fans, except in Montreal in the third round. But when I would go to the studios in Stamford, Connecticut, and do a game off the monitor in a tiny little, like an ice fishing shanty, it was this wooden shed with a little monitor, no lighting, and you'd sit in there and you'd call the game. You had to really dip into your passion for the sport, because our energy, whoever I was working with and myself, that's it. We were manufacturing energy for the fans. I hope we did a decent job. It's not ideal. It's not anywhere close to where it's supposed to be. I hope we never go there again. I hope they don't take the easy way out, try and save money and keep announcers in studios. I think it's horrible. But I do think we had to make it good, because at the beginning, it's funny, at the beginning of the bubble, in that summer, the two bubbles, we felt like we were doing a service, because no one could get out of their houses and we were providing entertainment. And then once the bubbles were over and we got to a new season, it was almost like, well, we got to try and make this the best we can, because they still can't get to the buildings, and not get frustrated ourselves. And it was not easy. And there are many games that I felt frustrated and the game was over and you go back and you're in isolation, you go back to the hotel room, you couldn't even enjoy yourself. So it's kind of weird, but it's been weird for everybody.
Now, a quick little follow-up to that, because you hinted at something during Brad's first question. Did it take you back to those early days of calling
Yeah.
games in your living room? And
Yes.
how did it make you feel suddenly reliving that experience?
You're right on, man. That's great, because that's exactly how I felt. I felt terrific. I kind of, to get a little spiritual, I kind of felt like it was me and my dad. I felt like because my dad used to do color for me, and
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
like I did the games, and they bought me a cassette recorder. I think I was 11 years old. And I did all the games, and his buddies would come over. And where we lived, we could actually pull in the Bruins games, and every game was on television with an old parabolic antenna. And they'd sit around and have a few cocktails and listen to me. The more they had, the better I sounded. And he would do color. And I had all the tapes, and then I lost them in a flood. My mom's house got flooded in the cellar. I lost all that stuff. But anyway, it brought me back because I had done this before. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, I would talk to my colleagues in that were stressing out about being in the studio. And for me, this is something that I had always done. And so it was like going back to my hobby again. So I felt like a kid some ways. That's a great question.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is. Sorry about losing all those tapes, though. That's gotta be
It's
difficult.
on my first game, all those games with my dad, they're all gone. I don't have any of that stuff.
Luckily,
Not
the
that any
memories
of it
live
should
on.
be heard or seen again, but I'd like to look at them.
Yeah, I think most of us would like to hear those little
Yeah.
12-year-old John Forslund calling a Bruins game.
Well, you can Google a brawl in 1987 between the Springfield Indians and the Fredericton Express. There's like 4 or 5 NHL coaches that are in this bench clearing brawl, and it's way before puberty for me. I don't even sound like myself. Yeah.
If we go back, obviously you're calling for the Kraken now, but you're talking about national broadcast for NBC and that.
Mhm.
How difficult is it to remain neutral when calling a game? I mean, for example, with the Hurricane, now with the Kraken, if you're part of a team for so long, and you've actually indicated multiple times, I've seen you respond to some people saying, like, stop getting so excited when an opponent scores. And, you've indicated that you don't sell down moments. So I guess that's kind of
right.
How do you remain neutral? How is that possible, I guess?
Yeah. So I told the story of when I got the bug, right, with Dan Kelly. I mentioned his name, and he was the CBS announcer for the St. Louis Boston Stanley Cup Final 1970. Well, he was dying of cancer in the 80s. And I worked with a guy named Jimmy Roberts, who was the head coach of the Springfield team in the American Hockey League. And they were best friends because Jimmy was the first ever captain of the expansion St. Louis Blues back in 1967. And Dan was the longtime voice of the St. Louis Blues. So he knew that I idolized him. So he arranged a phone call. And I talked to Dan. And Dan's the one that gave me the advice. He said, listen, don't ever sell a goal down. Don't ever sell a big goal, any big save. Don't play it down. Be true to the game. So what I try to do is keep the same style no matter what. Now, when I'm doing a regional game, it's a Kraken game or a Hurricane game or a Whaler game before that. Pretty much, if you're listening, you know which side of the bread the butter's on, okay? And I will take a home team goal and take it to another place that you can't do on national television. Okay. But by and large, my call is the same because I want to stay true to the sport. I want to be fair to the players. And if somebody makes a great play, great moment, I owe it to those players. And I'll tell you a story. Way back when Alex Ovechkin, among the numerous records he has, he set a record for most goals in a single season by a left winger. He beat Luke Robitaille's record. Okay. And I'm doing the game for Carolina and we're in Washington. Washington's doing the game. Washington got sidetracked within the call. They were talking about something else. The play was a quick strike up the wall. He came down and scored and they were caught in conversation and they called it, but they couldn't do it right. And it wasn't their fault. It happens. It's mechanical. It happens in broadcasting. I happened to be on it. I called it. I stamped it. I had emotion. That call ended up being the call that the NHL archived because it just made more sense. If I had sold it down, oh geez, Alex Ovechkin scores, and not even recognize his record or whatever, be a homer, then it does the game and him an injustice. These players are special. They have their moments. Their parents could be watching on either feed. I always keep that in mind. And again, if fans understand that, they're going to know where I'm coming from. And then my praise will mean more to the fans because I am not going over the top one way or the other. So that's the way I've always approached it. Some of the people here are going to have to get used to that. If they don't, that's their own deal. But I'm not changing. So if they don't like it, maybe I have to leave. I don't know.
No.
I think the calls have been great. Speaking of like calls for different teams, you've been part of both a relocation team and an expansion team. What's been the biggest difference that you've seen and felt between the two times that you've changed teams, I guess you could say?
Organization. So in other words, the relocation was a calamity. It was done in 4 months. It was the Hurricanes played out of market in Greensboro, about 70 miles west of Raleigh, for 2 years before the building was built. There were people there that didn't even understand why we were there in the first place. This was a knee-jerk decision by an owner who got mad at local government, state government, who could not get a building deal done in Hartford, who said, you know what, I'm picking up my stakes and I'm moving out. And at the time, it was perfect because Gary Bettman wanted a Sunbelt infusion of the NHL. He wanted to expand the footprint. He wanted to get to a place where we're at right now, where you can sell more national advertising because you're in Phoenix and Dallas and Seattle and California and Florida and Atlanta. They tried Atlanta and they thought that was going to be great, and it busted. It wasn't that great. And Raleigh and so on, and all these different places. Instead of being Canadian, Northeastern, couple teams in the Midwest, and oh yeah, for some reason there's teams in California, long before Quebec moved to Denver, right? So basically, this is easier because there's more organization attached to it. It's big league. It's a big deal. The facilities are unbelievable. The franchise and the organization, the people that are running this team have a strong commitment. And so it was an easy decision for me to join this organization. And really, I'm like coming in now as window dressing because the real work was done by all the people that have been here for 2.5 years. Those are the people that will celebrate opening night. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be part of it, but really my work has just started. And then if I'm lucky enough to do this for years here, then we'll look back and say, well, October 12th, 2021, that's when Forslund started. But there's so many people who have already worked for almost 3 years just to launch this thing. And that's the difference. And it's built in, and the fan base is here and ready, and the tickets are sold, and all those things weren't in place at all in North Carolina.
That's great. Knowing that there was that much prep in the Kraken's expansion versus what was sort of almost an Indianapolis Colts type of movement.
Correct.
Which everyone remembers, but most of us still want to forget.
Right.
When looking back, we've just experienced obviously some momentous occasions for the Kraken. Their inaugural season, first win, first goal, first captain, all really big events for the Kraken. The thing that preceded that was the expansion draft. What do you think the Kraken did really well leading up to and during the expansion draft?
Well, number one, I think Ron Francis had to navigate a different landscape. I think the general managers figured out, what happened with George McPhee. George McPhee is cunning, smart, organized, and he figured out a way to wheel so many different transactions along with drafting players that these guys were now, okay, fool me once, you're not going to fool me twice, right? So the rest of the league was ready. So Ron had to deal with that. And I think it surprised him a little bit. I think he thought he could make a few more trades than he was able to. So then he had to basically get to a draft. What I like about the draft is that it was a little bit different. It didn't follow the footprint of many forecasters who we could all have fun with it and look at names and pick guys. He basically looked at his team and said, I'm never going to get A-level scoring in an expansion process, but I might get character, I might get strong defense, I might be able to get goaltending. And I think he checked a lot of those boxes. Now this team's going to struggle to score. They're going to have a hard time scoring. They're going to have to grind games, and they're going to have to play way better detail-wise than they have in the first 5 games to be successful, because they were in position to win 4 of the 5 games, right? But they didn't. And why didn't they? Because they shot themselves in the foot with blown coverages, bad turnovers, in little pockets of time. I think a lot of that is because of the newness, lack of practice, in this long road trip, but that's all part of the excuse. Basically, I just think that's what he put together. So I think it's a team that's going to be pretty sound, I hope. I mean, that's what I think there will be. I think the coach will be able to get his system in place here and kind of get them to play the way he wants, and then make it difficult on the other side. And then over time, the Seattle fan base will develop an identity. And then when we get to the second half of the season, and I do think it'll take that long, teams will have a hard time coming in here. And I think that's where they're going to be able to take the next step, and hopefully make the playoffs. I mean, I think it's realistic to think they can, but they're going to have to be better than they've shown so far.
Yeah, if there's a rollover from the Seahawks 12, that building is going to be loud. If there's even a small amount of that rollover,
that's going to happen. And then for a lot of these people, many of them are aware of hockey, have followed hockey. There is tradition here, but there is also the neophytes. And those are the people. That's been my experience in North Carolina. The best Caniacs are the ones who never, ever saw the game before. And then when they see it live, they get completely hooked, and then they go crazy. And I think, at least that's my hope, that this place will be like it. And I know the architecture of the building is very steep. The fans are going to be on top of the rink. So it has potential. It really does, but we got to see it play out.
This is completely off, and I know it's not part of our list, but you said fans that had never seen the game before, that see it live, they get hooked. That was me. Like I didn't grow up watching hockey, playing hockey, or anything like that. I got hooked watching the very first, it was a Coyotes game playing the Minnesota Wild, and I saw it live, and I was hooked. Like, I feel what you just said was me. So
yeah, I just had a conversation with one of our camera guys, right? Who's going to do the fly cam in the building. He does the Mariners, he does football. He doesn't really know about hockey. And he was asking, he goes, what's so great about hockey? And I went on and on about it. And I knew he didn't believe me. I said, but you got to get in the rink and see it. I said, when you get in there and start working these games, because I saw it in Raleigh, like a lot of the people on our crew were NASCAR guys, NASCAR women, college basketball, college football. They took the gig to get a paycheck. And then once they started being on the hockey games, they were like, wow, this is incredible. And so you got to see it to believe it. That's my take on the sport. And there's nothing like seeing a hockey game live, as you can attest to, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we all 3 of us agree with that statement right there. You have to be there to really experience it. You can't see it on TV. I mean, it's great to see it, but it's just.
Yeah, no, TV just helps you follow it, right? You can't be at every game, but TV helps you follow it. And real good television, when we get, going, it can be very dramatic. And then because you know what it's like in the building, then you're getting it, but it doesn't work the other way around. I don't think TV draws people to the game. I think you got to see the game live.
So going back to the draft that we had just before, we had, in my opinion, I think we had to have a goalie situation to an extent, that they drafted Drager, and I felt like he was drafted as their number 1, and then all of a sudden they went and got Grubauer, who was available. I don't think they were saying that he wasn't available until later. Right. So Have you spoken with Drager? I know he's been put on the IR. Have you spoken to him? Maybe found out how he feels about being kind of not shifted to number 1, 2, or
Well,
1A or 1B?
yeah, the deepest conversations I've had with Chris were at the expansion draft and the night of the draft and the post reception we had afterwards, where he was on cloud nine, because here's a team taking a leap of faith. And I think he believed that he can, and still believes he can be a number 1. Now, Philip Grubauer, no one saw that coming. No one saw him being that available and then wanting to come to Seattle. So I think Drieger's a realist, and he looks at it. He's like, okay, here comes a guy with the pedigree. I gotta fight again, which he has done his entire career. But this is a position where anything can happen. Nothing is etched in stone in goal anywhere. Very few goalies. There are the Carey Prices and of course Lundqvist in his day and all this stuff. Even Marc-Andre Fleury. Look what's happened to him. I mean, how many guys have won the Vezina Trophy as the league's best goalie and get traded, in that season, right? So it's kind of a what have you done for me lately position by nature. And I think with Drieger, just keep applying yourself. It's too bad he got hurt. But the schedule and the way the team will be in a dogfight, you're going to need 2 goalies. And nothing, Grubauer is the number 1. There's no question about it. But if there's any crack in the armor, then the other guy gets an opportunity. So this is the best opportunity for Chris Drieger in his career. He's not playing behind a guy making $10 million a year like in Florida. No matter what he did, they're still going to go to Bobrovsky. They're still going to say, well, we're paying him. We gotta get to him. He's in a competition for it here. Now, there's no question Grubauer has an edge over him, but if he applies himself the way things roll out, there's enough people with the organization that believe in him. Yeah.
And Decord's playing pretty well in his absence too.
Decord was great. And for him to come in like he did, this guy, based on his training camp, what he did last year in Ottawa and what he's shown the other night, there's no question he can back up in the NHL for sure. So the good news is they're 3 deep for an expansion team. That's pretty good.
You kind of actually already touched about it with the start that the Kraken have had. 1-3-1 obviously is not where they wanted to be or maybe even saw themselves. Does it feel like a disappointment for them starting 1-3-1? Does it feel like it's not that big of a deal because they're just getting their legs, they're learning how to, you can practice all you want, but nothing's going to replace a game time situation. So I guess that's my question. Does it feel like a disappointment to the team for starting the way they did?
Yes, I think down deep it does. I think they can easily say we're going to be okay. They can easily say we could have won 4 of the 5 games. We're at least in a position to. Opening night to come back on a crazy day when you didn't even know who was going to be in the lineup because of this COVID thing, and 3 guys flying in on a private jet and playing, getting to the rink and basically playing, come back from 3 and then lose it on that play. Okay, fine. Then beat Nashville. It's really too bad they couldn't beat Columbus. Completely flat, obviously, against Philadelphia. And then a poor start and a dig out, and it wasn't good enough to beat New Jersey in a game they should have won too, right? So I thought 6 points were doable. They come out with 3. And I think the one thing to look at here, and this is my observation, I think they're angry because I think they feel that they did it to themselves. There were things that they should be better at that they were not up to speed with. So they should not blow coverage. They should be more systematic than they are. They should play with a lead better than they did. They're not a bunch of kids. These are experienced NHL players, and many of these guys on this roster have gone deep into the playoffs. And so I think the newness of the group, the lack of practice time, and it is an excuse, but I think it's a valid reason. 5 games in 3 time zones. The NHL could have said, hey, you're going to start 5 on the road. You're going to go Vegas, Arizona, Anaheim, LA, San Jose, and come back to Seattle. That still would have been difficult because it's all on the road, but you never would have left the Pacific time zone. I think they ran out of gas a little bit, and not physically, but mentally. And that's how they were out of position. That's how they fell behind. That's how they turned the puck over in the absolute ridiculous passes that they all can be better at. It wasn't a lot. It was just little snippets of time. They could have had a better record. So I think they're angry. I think they're frustrated. Now they come home in a position where they have to make good in these 4 home games. And, it's not absolutely vital, but the league is the league. You can't fall off the pace here. There's too much parity in the NHL, and there's already teams that are off to great starts. Edmonton wins tonight, they're 4-0. Vegas is injured right now. Take advantage of that. So it's the weakest division, to be fair, and they have an excellent chance, but they have to give themselves a chance.
And these two guys are pretty happy with their 3-0 start, but
No one saw it
Sharks
coming, and no one expects it to last. But we'll take it while
the
it's here.
Sharkies? Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't. Hey, good. You know what? At least Aiden Hill's doing his thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reimer just put up a beautiful game
And
tonight.
Reimer, I love James Reimer. I know him well, and I know he played tonight. And so that's been a big problem. And so that's good. And then they got the other distraction, is put aside for now. And, who knows? But good, because 3-0 is 3-0, and doesn't matter, what the forecasters say. You've given yourself a way better chance when you come out of the gate like that.
And I wanted to ask a real quick follow-up to Brad's question. Little spur of the moment, but it popped into my head. I've heard from broadcasters across the league that say, when a team is just coming together, the first road trip or the first 2 road trips really go a long way to establishing the camaraderie and the connection between players. And they will often see a lift in team spirit and team connectiveness after that. Do you think the Kraken will be able to bring some of that energy from this road trip and their quick homestand?
I think so. And I think they've been through a lot. There still have been some significant injuries. They haven't had a full lineup, and the COVID thing. And so they're not alone. Winnipeg's dealing with it. There's Pittsburgh's dealing with it now. There's a lot of teams that are dealing with COVID and will deal with COVID as we move forward. But it's really too bad. I felt bad for everybody in the organization that you get to this point to launch this, and there's COVID. A PR guy had to be quarantined. Our radio announcer, Everett Fitzhugh, who's been here for 2 years doing a lot of groundwork, couldn't do it because he was exposed and tested positive. And then you get to the players, right? It's very unfair. So I think that's galvanizing. That's something that will bring them together. I'm a voyeur, right? That's what I do. I'm a voyeur, and I'm around it, and I see how they behave, and I've been around a lot of teams, and I like what I see. I see a oneness. I see good camaraderie. I see some really good character players here, and I really believe that what's ailing them right now can be fixed with some good practices and trust in each other, which will come as you get to the 10-game mark, 15, and then 20. You get 20 games in an NHL season, guys, you basically know what you're at, where you're at, and who you are. Yeah.
Well, speaking about coming home, you guys have your first opening day on Saturday. Have you been to the arena? Do you have any? What are you excited for the broadcast of it from the arena, and what are you excited for the fans to see in the arena, not just the seating or whatnot?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see the identity of a Kraken fan, what that's going to be. I have no idea what it's going to be. I hope it's off the charts. I hope it's real. I hope they're passionate and mean to the other side. And I really think you got to develop that. That's something that Vegas got to in a hurry, right? Vegas, because it's Las Vegas, everyone said, oh man, they're going to have an advantage because teams are going to go there and party, and they're going to be able to have the Vegas flu, and the home team will have it. But it was more about the energy in the building and the energy of opposing fan bases coming to travel to Vegas to see their teams play. There was some of that in their initial launch. That's not going to be 100% what happens here. I don't know how many people travel to Seattle for a vacation in the middle of the winter. Maybe they do. I don't know. I think it's more or less this community. And I like what we talked about earlier. I think the Seahawks, the Sounders, it's been a long time for the Mariners, but they kind of quickly recaptured it this year with the kind of push that they made, right? So I think it's a good sports city. And I think that's going to show. That's what I'm anxious to see. I have not been in the building since July, so I have no idea what to expect. I was given a tour in July at the expansion draft that week, 90 minutes, hard hat. Everything was under construction. I got to see what the plans were, but Saturday I'll walk in for the first time.
I've just seen some posts on Twitter and stuff like that of people taking pictures. So I'm looking forward to going to see the game. John, I know you're super busy, so we won't hold you too much longer. I really appreciate you joining us. I look forward to hearing your call. Obviously, I live up here in Seattle. I've seen you a couple times at the Jersey launch, and then actually saw you up in Everett as well at the game up there. So again, I really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully for myself and for the Seattle fans, we hope Kraken kind of bounce back quickly from that weak start that we've had.
Yeah, well, it helps, right? Because everybody, well, I don't know if they're going to be that good, and all that kind of thing, which is natural. But it's going to be very exciting, and it's really just the beginning. It's just the beginning, and the thing about this is that it's the hashtag I use on my tweets, that's Kraken Hockey, applies to everything that happens when you have an NHL team. And it's not always about the wins and losses. It's about the players becoming part of the community, the messaging that the team sends out, the endeavors they get involved in. That's what's exciting to me about this. It's just, I saw this firsthand for a long time. I never thought I'd leave North Carolina. But I'm really happy that it went down the road that it did, because I couldn't be happier, because we're starting a new voyage as fans together. So I'm energized by the whole thing, and I appreciate you having me here. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right.